All right, well, good evening. Welcome to our Wednesday night Genesis Bible study. We are in Genesis chapter 28. We'll be looking at verses 10 through 22 tonight, what's labeled Jacob's dream. So grab your Bible, and we will begin reading Genesis chapter 28, starting in verse 10. So it says this: Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you, and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. And Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. And Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. All right, so here we have Jacob's dream. He comes to a place. He's left his home. He's on his way to Padan Aram. He's on his way to Laban's house. He gets to a certain place and he sets up shop for the night. He's getting ready to go to sleep. He goes to sleep and he has a dream. Now, in that dream, what do we find? Well, there's a ladder or stairs. The word here is ladder or stairs, that go from heaven to earth and has angels on it. We also have the promise of God, right? God passes on to Jacob the promises that he had given to others, to Abraham and to Isaac. He passes on what's called the seed promise. It's now Jacob's possession, in a sense, this promise. So what does the ladder symbolize, or what does the ladder mean? We look at this. Well, the angels are coming down and going up. The angels that are coming down is symbolic of the fact that God will speak with Jacob. And of course, the angels going up is saying that Jacob can speak with God and that God is going to hear him. Not that God wouldn't have heard him in the past, but this is a special relationship. There's a special connection going on here. There's communication between God and Jacob, and it's done in this symbolic way, right? It's done with the representing of this ladder and these angels going back and forth. There's actually a greater fulfillment of this passage in John. So we'll look at John chapter 1 and verse 51. And here we find Jesus, and he says, Truly, truly, I say to you, You will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Now, he is speaking to Nathanael. Right? He's speaking to Nathanael. This is the first time he meets Nathanael. You look at verse 49 here. It says, Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered him, because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree. Do you believe? You will see greater things than these. Then he goes on to say, you'll see heaven opened and the Son of Man, the angels descending and ascending in the Son of Man. So there is a fulfillment here. See, the reality is that Jesus is greater than Jacob. That's what we need to see in John chapter 1, verse 51, that Jesus is greater than Jacob, who is the father of the nation of Israel. Now, he was considered a great man, right? His name's changed to Israel later on in Genesis. And from him come all the tribes. He's the father of the nation of Israel in a very real sense. But Jesus is greater than him. Not only that, Jesus is the one who is in constant contact with God the Father in a deep and intimate way, deeper and more intimate than Jacob. And Jesus is the one through whom people get their revelation of and communication with God. Think about some of these other passages. Think about John chapter 1 and verse 18, which says, no one has ever seen God. The only God who is at the Father's side, he has made him known. That's speaking about Jesus. You think about John chapter 14 and verse 9. Jesus speaking says, have I been with you so long and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Again, he's in the midst of a conversation, but he says, whoever has seen me has seen the Father. And then, of course, Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 says, long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he has appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. Jesus is the greater fulfillment of what we see here in Genesis chapter 28. Jesus is the one who all the revelation comes through. The revealing and the communication of the Father are found, presented through Jesus. He is that access point, we could say. So we've got Jacob. He's got his dream of this ladder, the angels going up and down. It means communication between God. God is going to speak to Jacob, and Jacob is able to speak to God, and God will hear him. Now, what does God promise to Jacob in the dream? Well, in the dream, first of all, God identifies himself as the God of Abraham and Isaac. He is the God who has revealed himself to his father, his grandfather, right, to people in his line. He says that the land that Jacob is lying on is going to be his and his offspring's, right? So he promises this land. He's getting that land promise that Abraham got, that Isaac got. So it's getting passed on to him again. God blesses Jacob and says that he will have numerous offspring, right? He's going to have a large family. Lots and lots of people are going to come from Jacob. Jacob is blessed, and God makes him the head of the family and gives him the promises that he had given to Abraham and to Isaac. That's really what's going on here. There's this wrapping up and there's passing on to the next generation. He says that through his seed, right? God says that through Jacob's seed, all the families of the earth will be blessed. That is, Jesus is going to come through the line of Jacob. So we've got that seed promise being passed on. Why is he even leaving his home? Well, he's running for his life, right? You remember, he's running from his life. His brother wants to kill him. Do you think he might be afraid? Do you think he might be a little bit scared? Again, not only of his brother Esau, but what about the unknown? Might he be a little afraid, a little worried, or a little concerned, however you might put it, about where he's going? I think he is. He's traveling to a place he's never been, and he's going to visit people that he doesn't know. He doesn't know these people. They're relatives, yes, but he doesn't know them. He doesn't know what's going to happen on the journey there. Especially at this time, he could fall into bandits and robbers, thieves. People could try to kill him who don't know him. There's storms that could come up. There's shortages of food, maybe. There's attacks from wild animals. And there's all kinds of unknown. Jacob is fleeing for his life from his brother who wants to kill him, but he doesn't know what he's going to meet as he travels on to these people that he doesn't know in Padan Aram when he goes to meet Laban. Family members? Sure. But what kind of family members? Who are they? He doesn't know. So he's afraid. And God tells him in the dream, he says, I am with you. I will keep you, and I won't leave you, and I'll bring you back to this land. So again, I think it's clear that Jacob needed that assurance. He needed some assurance from God, which is why God assures him that he's going to be with him. If he wasn't afraid, if he wasn't in need of assurance, I don't think God would have said what he said here. When God tells somebody, fear not, it's probably because they're fearing. When God makes these promises to Jacob, I think it's because he's worried. He's worried. Not sure if he's ever going to return, not sure what's going to meet him on the way. So anyways, God assures him of this. Now when Jacob wakes up, what happens? Well, he says that surely the Lord is in this place, right? Surely the Lord is in this place. Verse 16, and Jacob woke from sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place. And I didn't know it. I didn't know it. I'm surprised I didn't know it. But verse 17 says that he was afraid. What's he afraid of now? Well, he's afraid of God. The disciples of Jesus are out in the middle of the lake, and all of a sudden a storm comes up, and the boat is rocking out of control. The wind, the waves, they are going down. The ship feels like it's going down. They're concerned, they're upset, they're afraid. They think they're going to die. They wake Jesus up. Jesus is sleeping in the back of the boat. They wake him up. They want him to get up. They want him to do something. They weren't thinking that Jesus was going to do some miracle. They wanted him to help. Get up. Don't you care that we're perishing? We want you to bail. We want you to batten the hatches, do all of that kind of stuff. So they wake him up. And Jesus, he speaks to the wind and to the waves, and they quiet down. What are they afraid of now? It says they were afraid. It's really not what are they afraid of now. It's who, right? Not what, but who are they afraid of? They're afraid of Jesus. Something similar is going on here with Jacob. The reality is that an encounter with God can often leave a person more afraid than before the encounter. Sometimes we think, I'd love to be in the presence, of God, and, I'd feel warm and fuzzy and all that. Notice a lot of times when people are in the presence of God, that they're often afraid. You see that in Isaiah. When Isaiah gets a vision of God, there's fear there. The disciples, when they recognize something different about Jesus, he speaks. And who speaks to the wind and the waves? Who speaks to creation and it bows its knee? Well, God is the one who speaks. Genesis chapter 1, right? God speaks. Creation comes into existence. I don't think the disciples fully understand who this Jesus is, but they're starting to make some kind of connection here, and they're afraid. And you see it in the book of Revelation in chapter 1. When John has a vision of Jesus, he's afraid. He's afraid. There's fear that goes on. So when someone has an encounter with God, often that person is more afraid of God than they were of whatever it was that caused them fear to begin with. But that's a good thing. I think more people need to have a fear of God today. I think that's a good thing to have a fear of God, right? Because the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Isn't that right? Look at Psalm 111:10. It says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 10 verse 27 says, the fear of the Lord prolongs life. Yeah. So the fear of the Lord is a good thing. So Jacob, he wakes up from his dream and he's fearful. I think Jacob is beginning to learn some wisdom. He's beginning to gain some wisdom here. Fearing the Lord is a good thing. What does Jacob do next? 17, he's fearful. But then he names the place. He says, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. He says this is the gate of heaven. Why? Why does he say that? Well, because he met God there in a special way, in a unique way. When people encounter God, when they have some kind of a miraculous event that happens in their life that they experience, they often name the place, or they put up some kind of a pillar or as a memorial or something along those lines. We saw it with Isaac. You remember Isaac is traveling around and he's digging wells. And while this isn't in relation to him meeting God or something like that, but he's digging wells, and what happens is there's contention with other people. There's strife with other people, and he names it. This well is named strife. This one's named fighting with people over water, or something along those lines. But then finally he says, "Oh, God has made room for me." So he names one of the wells. God has made room because they're at peace finally. Nobody's fighting over that well. It happens often. Abraham will meet God. God will speak to him or make a covenant with him or something along those lines, and he sets up an altar, right? He's setting up these monuments, a place of worship, that's true, but he's setting this kind of thing up. The nation of Israel will set up stones as monuments to God's miraculous workings. So often people will name places or things or put up pillars or create altars or something along those lines when they meet God, when they have some kind of special encounter, or when God does some kind of miraculous event. Even when not miraculous, like I said, with Isaac, you've got the naming of these different wells. It was something very common back then. The place where Jacob is at this point, is where Abraham had lived on 3 separate occasions. And now God is appearing to Jacob. So again, Jacob names this place Bethel. And the word Beth means house and El means God. So Bethel means the house of God, because he had encountered God in a very special and unique way here. Now, does that mean that this is literally God's house? Well, no. It's a significant place for Jacob, but it's not literally God's house. So we have seen this kind of thing again before, and we'll continue to see it throughout the scriptures. This naming of places and this setting up of pillars and monuments and those kinds of things. It's a way of remembering whenever Jacob visits or talks about Bethel, he's going to remember this vision that he had. He's going to remember this dream. He's going to remember the promises that God has made for him. So it's a way of remembering, and it's a way of reminding oneself, and of course telling the story to other people. You name the place Bethel, people are going to wonder why it's called Bethel. You tell them the story. We have a very similar thing that we do as well. As Christians today, we have baptism, which we do once. We are immersed into Christ. We become Christians. And of course, we tell other people about our experience. It's a reminder. We are remembering that time when we became new in Christ. But we also have the Lord's Supper. And we partake of that every week. And again, that is a reminder of the covenant with God. It's a reminder of the sacrifice of Christ. So we have these kinds of things that we do today as well. And when we eat the supper or we talk about the supper, we're reminded of all those wonderful experiences. We're reminded of all those wonderful things that God has done and the promises that God still has for us, that one day we will be with him in glory to come. So you'll see this over and over again in the scriptures, naming places, setting up pillars and reminders, and we also have these kind of reminders in the form of baptism and the Lord's Supper, two things that Jesus instituted. So God made a promise to Jacob, and he blesses him and all of that. But let me ask this: what were the conditions, the stipulations that God placed on his promises? God makes a promise to Jacob, but what were the conditions? Well, there weren't any, were there? God didn't say, Jacob, if you stop lying and cheating, if you become an honest man, I'll be with you. I'll bless you, and you won't have to worry about it. I'll bring you back to this land, right? He doesn't say that. You can look, he doesn't say, here are the conditions. God is going to teach Jacob some things. Providentially, behind the scenes, you're going to see as we continue to go through the book of Genesis here in the life of Jacob, God is going to be teaching Jacob. God is going to be walking with Jacob. God is going to be changing Jacob through his circumstances and things of that nature. But there's no conditions. This is an unconditional promise, very similar to what happened with Abraham and Isaac. There's unconditional promises, and we might want to ask why. Why is God making these unconditional promises? Well, because ultimately God is going to bless not just Jacob and his children, but the world. You remember he says, through you, all the families of the earth, right? Through you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. That's speaking about Jesus to come. He is going to bring about Christ through Jacob. So these are unconditional promises, and he is going to bless people eventually. He's going to bless them. But they're unconditional. So we'll see, again, Jacob's going to fail at times, lying, stealing, cheating, all those kinds of things. And God doesn't revoke those promises. He's going to be with them through those through the issues, his lying and all of that. But God is working a bigger thing out. So this is an unconditional promise like he's made in the past with some of his other people, Abraham and Isaac. It's interesting, though. It's interesting that even though God never made any kind of conditions, that Jacob puts himself under an oath to God, doesn't he? He says, if God will be with me, will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I have set up for a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. He basically says, if you do what you say, then you'll be my God. What does that mean? Well, I won't worship or serve any other God. You'll be my God. I'll take you as my God. I'll give you a tenth of all that you bless me with, right? Jacob is promising God a tithe, which is what the word tithe means. It means a tenth. He's going to give him a tenth of everything that God gives him, blesses him. It reminds me of, now I don't know that this is what's going on with Jacob. Culturally, there's a different culture going on here, but it reminds me of, in our modern times, when somebody experiences some kind of hardship or difficulty, maybe they or a loved one has been in a bad accident and they're in critical condition, or they've got diagnosed with a bad disease or something, and they talk to God and they say, God, if you heal me of this, if you bring me out of this, then I'll serve you, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. And again, I'm not sure that that's what's going on with Jacob. We are talking about different cultures, so he might have something different in mind of why he's doing it, but that's just kind of what it reminds me of. It kind of reminds me of that kind of thing, making a pact with God. Hey, if you do what I ask, or if you do everything that you said you're going to do, then I'll do this for you. But anyways, here we see, in this whole passage here, we see that God is choosing Jacob. He is going to use him as the vehicle to bring about the Messiah, right? He's the next generation. He's the next one in line. And he's going to begin to work with and through Jacob. Now, he's been working with and through and behind the scenes and all of that, but it's a very special point in Jacob's life. This is a transition period. From this point on now, the focus is going to be on Jacob and on Jacob's children, when he has children a little further on. But the story, the events, everything now is shifting. We're not really going to hear any more about Isaac. We're not really going to hear any more about Esau. The focus now is primarily shifted to Jacob. He is the one who has now received all the promises and all the blessings. And interesting, God is going to take this thief, this fearful person, and he's going to make him a faithful follower. Doesn't mean that Jacob is going to be rid of all his flaws. We'll see he still has flaws in the future, but God is going to change him and transform him and walk with him through life. And on the other side, Jacob will be a changed man. He's going to be a faithful follower. So there we go. Big transition period. Big event in the life of Jacob. Jacob's dream, Jacob's ladder, and ultimately all of these events are moving us forward, looking towards Jesus, the one who is going to come and ultimately bless all the families of the earth.